Hey guys, Keith here. It's been a while since I did my last video, and so this video I'm going to do a bit of a catch up. This is covering 2017.34 to 45. Huge number of changes in that time period. In fact, there's about 77 of them once you include all the xSchedule changes. But here we're going to talk through just the xLights changes that have appeared, and I'm also ignoring the vast majority of the bugs and just focusing on the new functionality. It's going to be a bit random. I'll pretty much go through them roughly in the order in which they were created, although I have reordered a couple of things. So let's start off with the Swiss Army knife of xLights, the VU meter, and there's a whole bunch of new changes there. So let's go and create a quick sequence. I can't stand that one. I can't do wizards. We'll do Amazing Grace. Okay, so we'll go in here, we'll put some timing marks in. All right, and we'll throw a VU meter down. We'll do them on my whole house, which is my pixels. All right, so there it is. Okay, we'll get rid of the effect assist. All right, so let's start with level pulse color to VU meter. Okay, so what this thing does, so it's one of these, so there's level pulse color. And so what this does, I probably should actually move this one over to here, because there's a lot going on over here. So here the music's much more intense, and basically what it's doing is every time the music reaches this sensitivity level, from below that sensitivity level, what it does is it does a color change and a pulse. So it turns the lights fully on and then progressively fades them back down again. Now the amount of time that it takes for the fade is governed by the bars element here, and the sensitivity governs just how often it happens by changing how intense the music has to be to actually trigger the change. And so as many colors as you have is how many colors it cycles through on each one of those events. So that's the first one. Add to VU meter level color. Okay, so this is similar, except instead of pulsing, it just changes the color. So you see it's not pulsing and fading, it's just turning the color to one thing or another. And so it just changes color as each time it hits an intensity in the music that exceeds the intensity from below that intensity. And that's when it changes. There's also timing event pulse color. So that one's a slightly different if we bring it back here into our timing marks. So timing event pulse color, so obviously it triggers on the timing event, and as it hits on each timing event, it will hit it, flash that color and fade, again using the bars for how long it takes to fade. So if I extend this out, it will pulse and fade much slower. Right, but as it hits each timing mark, the color will progress through the colors and loop back around and start back at white again. So that's timing event pulse color. Timing event bars. Okay, so timing event bars. So we had timing event bar, and what that did was basically break the model up into vertical slices, and on each timing event it basically progressed its way across. The number of bars here is governed by this thing here, so I make it smaller, which means it's a larger proportion of it, and on each timing event it progressively moves along using each color. The timing event bars option with the plural basically rotates those colors through, moving them along progressively. And so you can imagine yourself putting this on maybe a line of candy canes or something and progressively moving through the colors. So that's timing event bars. And then there's the shape effect. So this is going to look Let's go down to the matrix. There's my matrix. Where are we? So this was actually done by Scott, I think. Is it Scott? Yeah, it was Scott. Scott's one of the guys who's recently started to do some development with us. So we've always had the shape, level shape. And what this does is basically it defines the shape when it's very large. It's just so large you can't see it. And what Scott's done is he's gone and looked at the shapes effect, and he's gone and bought each of the shapes in from the shape effect. So all of those things that you know and love from the shape effect, like your love hearts and everything else, are now all available in the VU meter effect, pulsating with the intensity of the music, etc. So I personally think that one's actually pretty cool. And there's filled versions of all of them, which take advantage of all the colors, and there's just the single color outline versions as well. So it's all very, very cool. Very happy with that. So thanks, Scott. Okay, I talked in my other video on xSchedule. There was a change that was put in. We had commonly had people who were trying to output to their lights, typically just at the beginning of the season, were getting flickering, and it was typically because they had both xLights and xSchedule outputting to lights at the same time. So I put some code in there a while back, which basically tries to track at a system level. At the system level, whether or not output to lights is going on, so that if you output to lights from xSchedule and then you fire up xLights and you output to lights, you get a warning that says, well, hang on a second, you've already got something that's outputting to lights. It works reasonably well. It definitely has issues if xLights crashes and it leaves xLights in this uncertain state, thinking that it's outputting to lights when it isn't really doing so. I also do suspect that there is one circumstance where I haven't quite dealt with the flag correctly, because there's been too many people saying it's not quite right for me to believe that it's perfect. I'm sure we'll get there eventually. The thing is if this warning pops up, it doesn't actually stop anything outputting to lights. It will still output to lights, but it gives you the warning and gives you an option to go and fix it before it creates a whole bunch of confusion. Okay, set model start channel back to 1 when used. Okay, so this one's a layout issue. So if you're doing a layout, I don't know, we'll just pick this bauble, it doesn't really matter. And I go in there and let's imagine for the moment I had a start channel of 1000. Well, we definitely don't want that. Let's say start channel of 100, but I come in here and I say, actually, you know what, I'm going to go with end of model. When I click on end of model, notice that it changed the start channel back to 1. It never used to do that, at least. It used to leave it as 100, and that led to a lot of people having issues where it wasn't actually at the end of the model, it was at the end of model plus 100. And so now it defaults to 1, which we believe is the most common thing that people are going to want. You can still make it 100. It won't stop you doing so. It just makes it less likely that it's going to be a problem. The shape effect, I mean, you kind of saw a hint of that in the VU meter effect there with the shapes that Scott added in. But as part of the shape effect, we did add the crucifix, which gives you that nice cross. The other thing that we did add in there was the present effect, which gives you a fairly simple representation of a present, which also can expand. So a couple of changes there. I actually think that I'm going to make a liar of me here, but I'm pretty sure that Scott also added them into the ripple effect. No, he didn't. We didn't quite get around to that. Maybe next time we'll get around to that. Keyboard cut and paste to the custom model dialog. This was one of these weird ones, and I'm sure it's buried in time. why it was. Previously, in order to cut and paste data in here, you'd have to come over here and do a cut and paste. Now, however, you can just press Control-C, which I just did, and Control-V, and it will just paste the data onto there. So hopefully that will make editing inside the custom model dialog just that much faster than it previously was. Add an option to shrink the waveform display. I don't know if you noticed that, but my waveform here, this is on my laptop, which is, to be honest, where I do everything. And you can see that my waveform here is quite small. And that's because I have, and I think it must be here in settings, small waveform. So if I set it back to default waveform, that's the normal view of the waveform, which is a lot larger. This is the small waveform, so it takes up a lot less space. Just gives me that one extra row to sequence in on my small screen, because I don't really need to see it that big. Batch render option. So this was Dan. Dan took my Windows only batch render and basically created a batch render here. There it is. It's gone and scanned through all my directories and it's found all of my sequences. You can limit the directories that it scans. It will also do things like remember which sequences you chose to batch render. You can right click to select all or to clear it. Once you finish selecting all the sequences, you click OK. It will then go and render all of those sequences in batch and update the FSCQ files. It won't make any changes to the XML files. So if these XML files aren't valid for some reason, if you've deleted a model that they depend upon, etc., it's going to generate a bunch of errors, and then when you fix them, it's not going to save them. So I suggest you have your sequences in good shape before you use the batch render. But you know, when you're in final stages of setup and you're making a few tweaks here and there, maybe adding a dimming curve on a model or something like that, can be very powerful to be able to just quickly go back and re-render all your sequences, and batch render will do that. As at this version, it will also remember what you rendered last time. So if you're not using all these sequences, and I don't use all of these, I can just choose the ones that I do. I render it when I come in next time. Only those ones will have been selected. Saves me having to fish back through the list and update them all. Add a warning when loading or creating sequences that result in a massive amount of memory being used. We always logged this in the background, but Dan's made it a little bit more front and center because a few people were running into issues with it. Chris has added an update checker for Linux and OS X. Basically, this will check to see if there's a newer version of xLights available and prompt you. I'm running on Windows, so I can't show it to you. The version for Windows is just not there yet. I think there's some changes we need to do on the website to make that work. Add sequence to check for overlapping effects. So look, to be honest, this shouldn't be possible, but we have come across situations where some people had effects which actually on exactly the same line overlapped with each other, and it caused no ends of issues. We believe that there was a bug sometime in the middle of last year, and if you were doing multiple imports, it could actually do this. So check sequence will now spot if that's a problem. What it does is it's interesting, it doesn't actually break anything. Everything still works okay. It just takes a long time to process. And so check sequence will now flag those situations. There is a simple way to fix it. Basically, you import everything into a new sequence and it will get rid of all the overlaps. But yeah, that's now highlighted in check sequence if that's going on. Allow user to change. Okay, so you've always in setup been able to add a I don't know, let's add 2 universes and add them as one output. And so what would happen is you would get this single line item down here, which is actually 10 universes. But once you added it, you couldn't change it. Now you can come in though, and you can actually increase this to 12. And so it's a change that Dan made. That's that one. Multicolor support for non-rotating text. So Dan added this as well. This is actually kind of nice. it gets rid of one thing that I used to have to do. But there is a downside to it, which some people stumbled across. If you happen to have a piece of text here, and you say hello world, why is that not displaying? Let's go and just use, why is that not displaying? Okay. What have I forgotten? Effect normal. Okay, let's go and create a new sequence, see if that fixes it. Should have done something silly. Probably all of my tinkering, I've gone and broken something. Okay. I know what I was doing wrong. Okay, so you'll see here that it's alternating each letter according to the color. Now, a number of people updated their old sequences, and the old text effect used to only look at the first color. And so the fact that you had green and blue would actually mean nothing, but they then stumbled across the problem where all the text was now multicolored and had to go back and fix it. So we don't normally like to break things, but I guess in this case, there wasn't really much choice if we wanted to have that functionality. So yeah, that's multicolored support for non-rotated text. If the text is rotated, I think Dan had some issues with measuring the text or something, which meant that it couldn't be done at that point. Who knows, maybe in the future. If updating the palette of settings for a lot of effects, aggregate the render events. So to be honest, I left this in, and normally I actually deleted a lot of these sorts of enhancements because it's very much a behind the scenes thing. But we do continue to work on finding the things that are running slowly or generating unnecessary work and cleaning it up. It can be very hard to do. There's an awful lot that goes on in the background in xLights when you just drop one of those effects. But yeah, Dan in this case was busy finding some extra steps that didn't need to be done and cleaning them up. ArtNet to FPP Connect upload. Basically what this does is if you had an ArtNet universe in here, I'm not going to add one, but if you had an ArtNet universe in here and you use FPP Connect and upload it, it used to only upload the SACN or E131 universes. Now it will actually upload the ArtNet universes as well and configure your FPP correctly for you. Abort generating the custom model processes. So this, for those that have used the generate custom model, it used to be that if you had I don't know, 20 channels in here and you kick this, run the capture pattern, and it would go off and start sending data, and you'd have to sit here and wait, and if it wasn't working properly you'd still have to wait. Now you can press the escape button and it will just stop the process, and you can do the same for the video process. If the video process doesn't look like it's picking anything up and it's a real problem, now you can press escape, abort the process and go back and reset the parameters, which should save you a bit of time. So remember, it's the escape key. Right click to disable unused outputs. So this is this one here, deactivate unused. What it will do is it'll actually go through all of your models, find all of your unused universes and disable them. And you can see I've got a stack of unused universes which is now gone in and disabled. And I can now go and look at those and decide whether I want to delete them because clearly I'm not using them. So a very fast way to see if you have any universes or outputs defined in there that you're not actually got any models on. So that's what that one's about. We've already talked about the present shape effect. The single color intensity string type. Okay, so this is something that Gil introduced. Normally when you define here's a star, and we're going to define the string properties. And we used to go in and say, oh, look, that's a single color string and it's red or whatever. And what would happen is when we were generating data, we would only turn this star on to the degree that the particular element had red in it. And so if you put a green happened to land on the star, then it would just turn it off. But if there was any red or maybe some yellow or something like that that had a red channel in it, we would turn the star on, which is all well and good, and it's one of the reasons why in AC mode we sequence with white as the default color, because we know it will always trigger regardless of what your underlying prop is. But what Gil's done is he's added this single color intensity. And what that does is basically this element will now react to any color. So it doesn't matter what color you drop on the effect, whatever is the brightest part of that color will now determine the color of that, or sorry, how intensely that particular channel is turned on. So if you're doing just dumb RGB type elements, you may want to do that as a slightly simpler way of sequencing. Add left-right locations for candy canes. So on the candy canes model, you now have the green square, red square, green square, blue square. Notice how we've got rid of the left-right type option here and made it a little bit clearer. There is only one thing that I will highlight to you. If you lock the model, the green square is still green, but now the blue square is red, which is how we indicate that it's locked. Unfortunately, we don't change this to say red square. So blue square is actually the red square. Trick for young players. Import superstar files onto a submodel. So when you're doing an import effects, and you're doing superstar, I do have a superstar in here. Light of Christmas, there we are, there's a superstar file. Now when you're selecting the model, you can actually select submodels. So if you've got a tree and you submodel the front of the tree and you want to load it just onto the middle 12 strings of a round tree or something like that, you can now import your superstar sequences just onto that submodel, rather than having to bring it in onto the whole tree and then maybe cut and paste it or do something else weird and wonderful. So that's that one. Add active timing marks to color curves. All right, so if you haven't seen this, this is kind of cool. I don't have any here, but let's go and add. Actually, a text effect's not a great effect for this. Let's add bars, because bars has got it. So if I was here and here's my bars setting and I want to use a value curve on the palette repetition. Notice how the bars effect starts here. It has a timing mark here and here. Well, now when I go into the value curve, you can actually see where those timing marks are. So that's these two timing marks represented here. So if you then choose to go and do a custom value curve, you can align some of those value curve elements with the timing marks and know that that's when they're going to happen, which I thought was kind of cool. And you can also do the same thing with your color curves. So I can take my color change event, and within the limits of the number of settings we allow you, which is not unlimited, you can put your color stops right next to those timing marks and trigger color changes right on the timing marks. So let's make that pink as well. So you can see I've got that transition right on the timing marks. So now your color curves can be very tied to exactly your music and your timing and your value curves as well. Undo to update effect and palette actions. So previously, if you clicked on this update, which does a color update, or you clicked on this update, which updates all the effect settings, you couldn't undo it. Dan went in and fixed that, and now you can press the Control-Z key or go, I think it's in the edit menu. Yeah, there's the undo, and you can actually undo that action, which you previously couldn't do. Delete all effects on a layer on a model. So basically, previously, if you wanted to delete all effects on a model, you would have to zoom right out so you could see the whole sequence to drop it, to then go and delete it. But now you can come here and you can just delete everything off the row or delete everything off the model. So if I had another layer there, I can come here and say, yep, delete all the model effects, and it will just clear all the effects off that model. So if you're about to do another superstar import or another import and you just want to clear that model off, that's how you do it. While you're here, you'll see we've also added these squared bracket numbers. The first one on the model name tells you how many layers are on the model, and then every layer other than the first layer has the number of the layer. Now, it doesn't mean a great deal when you've only got 4, but you know, if you're a Steve Giron and you've got 27 or 65 layers, it can be kind of neat to see which layer you're looking at. Warn 64-bit. So this is another enhancement from Scott. He's gone and implemented a change where if you try and run the 32-bit version of xLights on a 64-bit computer, the first time you do it, and only the first time you do it, it'll warn you and tell you that, well, hang on a second, you could actually run the 64-bit, and the 64-bit version is better on Windows because it's generally faster, and obviously it has much better memory capabilities. We've already seen the changes to the VU meter with all the various shapes that Scott added to it, so we'll skip over that one. The model as a pixel render style. So this is kind of interesting. I don't imagine many of you are going to use it, but if I take a group, I like my trees. I'm going to call it a 3 trees group. So let me go up and find that 3 trees group. Actually, I'll go to my snowflakes. All right, there's my snowflakes there. And let me throw a bars effect on my snowflakes. And we'll go to the right. Get rid of that color, and we'll actually use proper colors. And as you can see, it's drawing the bars across it. The problem with this is, you know, you get these sort of half colors on the snowflakes, which I don't really want it to do. I actually want the snowflakes to act like they're a single pixel, but they're not a single pixel. They're like 37 pixels. So now what you can do is you can come up here and you can say single line as a pixel. And now what it does is it treats each model within that group as if it's a pixel. Now you'll see it's actually also moving the other way. The reason it's moving the other way is because it's putting them in the order that they were put into the model group, and this happens to be snowflake 1, which is why it's going across like that. If you use the default model as a pixel, it will actually render correctly, because here it's using the screen position of the center of each model to decide whereabouts it sits when the bars affect. So this allows you to take a group of candy canes or something else and treat them as if they're a single channel model, basically. It makes each model effectively like a dumb RGB model. And you'll never get any partial when you're using that particular render style. So really quite powerful in some circumstances when you want things to behave that way. Add some fast deleting of effects in a layer model. Okay, so I showed you how to do that. That's the right click. Undo. So Dan, then having me added the delete, Dan added the undo in because I forgot about it. Warn users when they switch to a backup show folder. Okay, so we've seen a number of people this year who, for one reason or another, felt the need to go into a backup, and so they came in here and they said, oh, I need to grab that backup, so oh, this backup here, and select it. Now what will happen is it gives you this warning, opening a show folder inside a backup folder. This is okay, but please make sure you change back to your proper show folder and don't make changes in this folder. And the reason we do that is because, you know, once you do this, suddenly you're in a backup folder and the backup folder is creating backup folders, and we've had people 2 or 3 backup folders deep and no one knows what the right show folder is, etc. So it gives you this warning to say, hey, No, we're not going to make any of those changes. Hey, that's probably not a good idea. I think it'll also warn you when you open xLights up that you're in a backup folder as well, again, to try and discourage you from doing so. But let's go back to our regular one. All right, so that's what that one's about. Control S. Okay, so Control S as a shortcut now works in all tabs. So if I press Control S here, okay, it didn't work, did it? Let me make a change, press Control S. Yes, it's saved. There, press Control S, it saved my setup, and in the sequencer, Control S will also save if I have something open. So just a generic shortcut that works in each tab appropriately. Detect low proportion duplicate nodes in custom models. So for some time now, in custom models, if I was to duplicate a node, let's duplicate 13. Sorry, let's not duplicate 13, let's delete 13. All right, so we'll delete 13. Click OK, and then we'll run check sequence. Okay, so now what it's done is it's telling me here, oh, look, you're missing a node. These ones are missing because they're actually there, but I don't want them to be modeled, so they're hidden. But this one here, it's told me that it's missing 13. But the one thing that we never did very well was if you came in here and added 13, but then accidentally added a second 13, we would not tag that. In fact, one of the things that we do is the wiring view suddenly changes from being a neat wiring view to this sort of multicolored dots. And that happens because I've got the double 13. If I come and look at this one here, it gives you the wiring view, my crazy wiring pattern for my bauble. And so that's one way that I could tell that, hey, there's a duplicate node in here. But now when you go into check sequence, it looks for duplicate nodes, and there's nothing wrong with duplicate nodes. In fact, if you've got a dumb string type model, you actually want duplicate nodes. But in this case here, it's saying, look, that model, node 13, has 2 instances, but multi-instant nodes are rare in this model, so this may be unintended. And in this case, it was unintended. I didn't want to have 2 13s. I accidentally created them. So yeah, a common cause of problems, and it's trying to identify for you. Add the option to turn model blending off by default. So at the beginning of 2017, we should create a sequence first. In the sequence settings, we added this option to allow blending between models, which lets you blend effects between model groups and models and all sorts of things where there's overlapping channels, and it's quite powerful. But a lot of sequences that were created prior to this year, this would be off by default. And sometimes when you buy a sequence and you bring it in, having this on can generate a whole bunch of issues. I know people have had a whole bunch of issues with some of Logan's sequences because they were all created without blending models. And when you create a new sequence and import from someone like Logan's sequences, and you've got this turned on and he had turned off, it can generate a whole bunch of really weird results. So now for those people that don't want to turn that on by default, there is now a model blend default off. And so if I go and create a sequence, and if I go and look in here, you'll notice that it's now turned off. So it doesn't actually turn that on by default. So you may want to do that. It's up to you. Horizontal and vertical stack buffers. So this is interesting. What's the best way to show this? The best way to show this is with my 3 trees. So with my 3 trees, if let's see if it works with circles. So these are pixel models. There is something going on here. Why am I not seeing that? That's twice now that's happened to me. Oh, Default model is a pixel. There we are. We're on default. Okay. All right. So there it is. You can see that the circles are going, but there's a gap between the models, which means that when the green or when it leaves this tree and enters the next tree, there's a gap there, and that's the default way that models work. If I go to this new horizontal stack, what it actually does is it brings the models next to one another as if they're all together. And this is really powerful. And the best place to see this is with the text effect. So putting hello world across a model group does absolutely nothing for legibility. It's just awful. And a lot of people have experienced this with the text effect on groups. It just doesn't work. But with this horizontal stack, it actually becomes workable. And the reason it becomes workable is because it now creates a buffer which joins the trees all together. Now, this would look so much better if I had matrices on columns or something like that. But it lets you join everything together in a consistent way and put text across things. It also lets even things like butterfly look a lot better and more consistent. Spirals look more consistent. These are actually joined to one another all in a single buffer. Even something like, VU meter is not going to work because what do you know, I don't actually have it. But even the sine wave is going to provide something that's, again, more consistent. You can also vertically stack them. That one probably doesn't look as well, but actually a morph would be a great way to see this. Okay, so you can see how they are effectively stacked on top of one another because it starts here, goes here, goes here. And the order of the stacking is the order in which the models were added into the model group. The horizontal stack will show you how they are all alongside one another. And if I was to set that to sweep to the right, it would start on the right and move its way across. So all those models are neatly joined together and joined up. So a whole bunch of effects that otherwise didn't work very well now work well. So that's that one. Effect setting, bulk editing. Okay, so this is now quite pervasive. So if I have a bunch of effects on here, let's put it on circles. And let's say I want to fade all of these out in the last second, I can actually now come up to this out transition time, right click on this field, say bulk edit, type in 1 second, and now each one of these effects has got a transition out time of 1 second. So the bulk edit was applied onto every single effect that was selected. This is available all over the place. You can even do things like, I don't know, let's right click here, bulk edit. I can even do a value curve and bulk edit them. So if I click on this effect here, there's a value curve for the sparkles, a value curve still for the sparkles. So pretty much everything can be bulk edited, even the effect settings. The only difference is with the effect settings, if I select all of these and I come down here and try to right click to bulk edit, I can't do it. And the reason I can't do it is because I've only selected one circles model. But if I had a second circles model in here, and now I select all of them, I can come down here and now I can bulk edit and check those. Now, that will obviously only apply that setting to the circles models. These other two models will be ignored because they don't actually have these settings. But the settings are in these panels up here obviously do apply. Now, the bulk edit's available almost everywhere. It's not available in the color because you've got the update button, so it's not relevant. It's available on render stack. It's not available on the sub buffer. There's no bulk edit on the sub buffer, mainly because I didn't think I could come up with an easy way to do it, but maybe I should, I'm not sure. The roto zoom all works. All of these settings here, all the ins and out transitions all work. All of the colors here, the hue adjustment, everything here all has bulk edit associated with it. So hopefully that makes your life a little bit easier when you either accidentally find that you've set a wrong setting, or you just want to grab a whole bunch of settings and change them all at once. It'll save you a bunch of time. So that's bulk edit. And coming soon will be some additional bulk edit in the layout tab as well. Show layers and layer numbers and row headings, so we've seen that. Fixing, okay, so this was Craig. Craig Vival's got busy with a couple of things. So what he's done here, he's added the dice icon here, and if you click it, it will keep the effect the same, but it will randomly change the settings. And you can click this as many times as you like until you get something you like. He also fixed the actual randomize. So you'll all know the old random settings thing where you go in here and you select a bunch of cells and you say create random effects. Well, this used to randomize the models, but what it didn't do is it actually didn't truly randomize all the settings. Craig's now changed it so it does actually truly randomize the settings. So you get to experience and see the power of the randomize function and all the various options and how they could change. And that's it. That takes us through to 45. So 2017's been a big year. There's been a lot of changes this year. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I look forward to some of the changes coming in 2018.1. Some good things, like I said, there'll be some ability to do things like change dimming curves in bulk. That'll be coming soon. So you can actually select a whole bunch of models and set a dimming curve. You'll also be able to set controller connections. You'll be able to create groups by highlighting the models you want in the group and create a group. We're also probably going to start to get to a point where we can start to increase the range of some of the settings in the sequencer as well. I do strongly suggest that if you've got any old sequences, you should be loading them up into 2017.45 and saving them, because some of the changes that we're going to introduce in 2018 will basically be incompatible with sequences prior to, I don't know, somewhere around the 20, 25, 27 mark or thereabouts. It's not that they won't open. You'll basically be told that there are some value curves that may not come across correctly, and so you'll get a warning about that. It's fixable. It's just a bit of a pain. So we strongly suggest you open and save all of your sequences that you want to keep carrying forward in the latest version. So thanks, guys.